Hey guys, welcome back to another edition. I'm Mike, and if you're brand new to this channel, please feel free to hit that subscribe button so I can see you again next time. But if you're coming back and you're not subscribed as of yet, please do so. Join me in this awesome adventure where I try to upload content around 3 times per week, and I've got so many great ideas coming to this channel very shortly. So today I actually want to talk about a documentary review because I got a chance to check out this documentary, but I believe it's got a general release of July 2nd, and it's called Last Man Standing, Suge Knight and the Murders of Biggie and Tupac. Now, this is directed by Nick Broomfield, who directed Biggie and Tupac from around 2002, back then about Biggie Smalls and Tupac's murders and how they've been unresolved and the evidence that he kind of brought to light in that kind of documentary. I'm just going to be completely honest and say that I haven't seen that documentary. The knowledge that I have of Tupac, so my nephew is a big R&B hip-hop fan and rap, so he's told me a lot about Biggie Smalls and Tupac. I also know about them because I've seen like All Eyes on Me, the Tupac film. I've also seen like Straight Outta Compton, which touched on like Suge Knight, and so did All Eyes on Me. So I've kind of gone in this with some knowledge, but not far more than probably a lot of people who have kind of followed these kind of 2 murder cases, or who are potentially just bigger fans of Tupac and Biggie Smalls. So I went into this documentary just completely open-minded and took it for what it was, knowing that I was going to learn a lot from it. And I can safely say I did learn a lot more from this about like the LAPD's involvement without giving too many spoilers. And also a lot more just about the general murders themselves and kind of a little more background about what caused them. Because All Eyes on Me did touch on, of course, Tupac's murder, but it didn't really touch on a lot about Biggie Smalls, you know, so I've kind of learned that bit more kind of for the first ever time. I'll expand on my knowledge of that. So Nick Broomfield returns to do this documentary, and I definitely feel like a part of this in that kind of 2002 documentary, because he does show footage of Russell Poole, who was a detective at the time. Now, I'm not here to comment on his detective work. I'm not here to comment on any kind of big controversies or anything like that. I just want to talk about the documentary and what you can kind of expect going into it. So the documentary itself was around 2 hours or so long. There was certainly elements and interviews kind of taking part in this documentary that I found really fascinating. Like, for example, Tupac's producer, Tracy Robertson, came forward and did an interview on this. His second mom, or Biggie Smalls' mom. And there's just so many people like Lip Dog, Snoop Dogg's cousin, Danny Boy as well, a big artist at Death Row Records, and this does certainly touch on Death Row Records and a lot of stuff that happened at that time during its existence. So yeah, really, I found it to be an overall fascination watch. Certainly a lot more for me, as I didn't know a lot of this information, so I really took this as kind of just an outsider into this documentary, and I felt like I learned a lot from it, which is just fantastic. Now, am I going to believe every single word that was said in this documentary? No, absolutely not. It's kind of reading more of the facts for yourself and reading kind of more of the backstories and kind of like, you know, published articles out there to kind of see what data kind of coexist. You can come to a judgment on these kind of sort of big materials, and especially this big story that still kind of remained unsolved even until now. All I can just really say from watching this documentary is that the music industry really did lose 2 big icons, because even to this day, people still know Tupac. They still know Biggie Smalls, or Notorious B.I.G., however you want to refer to him as. People still recognize those as 2 of the greatest hip-hop, R&B, rap artists of all times. Maybe if you're going to introduce people into the kind of this genre, you're probably going to introduce them to those 2 artists. You know, I certainly recollect some of their songs as well, especially again as my nephew taught me a lot more of those songs, because it's not usually my type of music. But yeah, I really felt like I took a lot away from this documentary. The one part of this documentary that I wasn't really a big fan of, and I noticed because, again, Nick Broomfield, I've never seen any of his documentaries, so I'm not really too familiar with his work. So this could just be a consistency with his work, I really don't know. But at times, there were these edits where, say if I'm talking, it cuts just straight to this, and it was just very cut, almost as if he was trying to cut down what these people had actually spent their time to tell him. And I really felt like some of the editing in this was pretty appalling. It kind of felt like it didn't have like a second brush over. It felt as if it had this one kind of just brush over take the entire thing, and then that was kind of it. And I was a bit like, well, for this kind of big documentary person, and for this guy that's created this kind of big legacy, or especially this Biggie and Tupac documentary 20 years ago or so now, like, his editing style surely should be better than this. And there's at certain points when there was images on the screen where for example, say this showed like Suge Knight's kind of ride he was driving in, the text would point with a little arrow saying that was Suge Knight, but the text looked as if it was kind of done by like a 2-year-old. Really, is this the best that you've got? I definitely believe this should have been checked over, definitely at least once more, before putting this big product out, because it is going to go into cinemas, then it's going to go on video on demand. But I just felt like the editing for this documentary has to be solid if you're going to put it together, especially one that's about 2 big known artists. You really have to have that credibility, and sometimes, especially like say for example like me, who does create this YouTube content, and my fellow YouTubers, we will see those edits straight away and be like, yeah, that's a poorly being put together. And I guess at times it felt as if they were telling the story about the present day of Suge Knight being sentenced, and then it was kind of going back, then forward and back, then forward and back, and then it kind of sometimes felt like it was trying to get lost in its own narrative. For anyone going into this documentary that knows a lot about these 2 artists, do I feel like there's going to be new evidence shed on here that you can take away from this? Yeah, maybe bits and pieces that you certainly can, but the shameful thing about this whole thing is, whether it's a documentary film, whatever it is, unfortunately these murders still remain unsolved, and unfortunately I think maybe forever they will still remain unsolved. So this, in a sense, doesn't kind of achieve any kind of final resolute, if that's specifically what you're looking for out of this documentary. I actually do recommend this documentary. I felt like I personally learned a lot of information from it, especially as I'm not really too familiar on these 2 big artists as much as say other people are, and I felt just as a whole that this was actually a really entertaining watch. I wasn't bored by it, I wasn't checking my phone, I wasn't checking for like how long was left of this at all. I actually really enjoyed it, and actually came out, it was actually upsetting, you know, to learn about these 2 artists. And yeah, I definitely feel like you're going to take away something from this documentary. Last Man Standing, Suge Knight and the Murders of Biggie and Tupac, and my score for the documentary is... So yeah, I hope you guys really enjoyed this review. Please feel free to hit that like button and also subscribe to the channel if you already haven't. And until next time, this has been the Z Review, and I'll be seeing you later.